Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking around and or coming back to the Q&A and panel discussion for Shorts Clarendon. We have a couple of the filmmakers with us, and I'm so excited to bring them to the screen. Hi, guys. How's it going?
Hi. Great.
Hi.
Going great.
Great. Yeah, so we have how about I'm going to have you guys introduce yourselves. I think that's just easier. How about you introduce yourselves, and then your film is listed right there, but in what capacity you worked on your short. And let's start with Meg, because you're unmuted. So
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Meg Shutzer. I'm the director, producer, wearer of many hats for Knocking Down the Fences. And if you saw it, great. And if not, it's a short documentary about A.J. Andrews, the first woman to win a Rawlings Gold Glove.
Great.
I'm Nick Natale. I'm the director of Games of Survival, A Culture Preserved in Ice. And it's the film about the World Eskimo Indian Olympics.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, guys. This package was so, I don't know, sports heavy, which was awesome, but sports as this vehicle for people to, how did they put it in the film? Reach a higher place, I think is what they said in the Koji 100 film. And I just thought it was such a great cohesive package, and your films fit into that almost in a direct and inverse way in some ways. I'm wondering what brought you to the material that you guys sort of what drew you to the subject, and how you got involved in the projects. Whoever wants to take that one first.
You can go for it, Meg.
Right. Sure. Yeah. A really useful lens for understanding our culture and society, and they're accessible, I think, to a lot of people. And I became interested in making this film when someone told me about A.J. Andrews and sort of shared a little bit about her story. And I remember at the time I had no idea that professional softball existed. I had never heard of her. And when I saw what A.J. could do and her flying catches and kind of the accolades she was receiving, I just felt like we should all know who A.J. Andrews is. And that should be a household name like we know a lot of other mostly male athletes. And so it felt like this kind of space that the sort of institutional media was not covering her story, and there was an opportunity to get just like the beginning of her story into the world. Like, I hope there are lots more films about AJ in the future, but that was the motivation for me to do this one.
Yeah, she was incredible. She in and of herself is motivating and inspirational. So
yeah,
that makes
she really is.
And how about you, Nick?
Yeah, my film sort of started out as a thesis film for a master's, and I had traveled up to Fairbanks, Alaska, I don't know, like 7-ish years ago, and I had saw a flyer for WEO, the World Eskimo Indian Olympics, and it was just kind of sitting in the back of my head. And when it came time to make a film, I was living in Fairbanks again, and I was like, all right, well, WEO seems like a perfect opportunity. This is awesome. And I decided to sort of reach out to some of the athletes that were listed on the website who had won a lot of the gold medals in the past. And that's how I ended up meeting Nick Hansen. And, he was a big help recommending some of the other characters that show up in the film. And originally it was going to be just a piece about him, but as I started filming and working with the folks in the community, I realized that there are so many other athletes who have also like really interesting stories to tell, and how it's such a community-based event in sport. It's not really about the individual athlete at all. So that's sort of how the film progressed. Yeah.
And so is there a difference? I mean, there is a difference, it sounded like, between WEO and the native games, or are those the same things?
No. So there are 3 events. There's the World Eskimo Indian Olympics, WEO, that happens every summer. There's the Native Youth Olympics, which is the same set of games, but that happens, I think, also every summer or sometime. And then there's the Arctic Winter Games, which are a multinational competition. So that happens every other year, and it's in one of the host countries. So you have to be a circumpolar country. So it's, Canada has like 3 teams. Alaska is the USA team. There's a few in Russia, Scandinavia, some other countries up there. But they compete in traditional native games, and they also compete in like soccer and, regular sports as well.
Wow. Yeah, it's funny. So both of these films, I mean, deal, at least for myself, like same thing you had said, Meg, too, about like not knowing there was professional softball. Like these are two sort of niche, not even niche. I don't even know if that's the right word to say it, but it's two sort of cultures, I guess, of athletics that I was so unaware of, and I'm guessing are not particularly mainstream. When you were filming with AJ, did you get sort of immersed in that culture of professional softball too? And what was that like?
Actually, the kind of weird thing about this film is that I really only spent a day and a half filming with AJ, and had originally gone down to Baton Rouge to meet her and to do sort of like a quick shoot and maybe use that to raise money for the eventual film. And then, given how busy her life is, and we'd already had a lot of conversations on the phone, we just covered so much ground in a day and a half that when I got home, I was like playing around with what I had, and just it kind of came together into what it is now. And so I can't say that I got deeply immersed. We were filming also on LSU's campus, but I know that like softball is huge in parts of the country, and I've been now kind of seeing through AJ's social media and other people that I know and follow in Louisiana that there's just there is this world of softball that I didn't know about.
Yeah, that's so that was a pretty quick filming process. Nick, how long were you filming for? I'm wondering, because I'm guessing those events are pretty spread out.
Yeah, so I was living in Fairbanks, which gave me some time to sort of spread out a lot of the shooting. The actual events, WEO goes for 4 days. So I was there every day sort of filming the actual games. And then I spent 4 days in Unalakleet, where Nick Hansen lives, and 4-ish days in Anatuvik Pass, where Stan Riley lives.
What were some challenges that you guys faced filming, whether it was logistical or in the filming process or in the editing room or anything like that? Where were you having a couple struggles, and how did you sort of overcome those? Whoever wants to take that one.
I can jump in there. I think for me, AJ had so much to say, and you kind of get that sense from her. She's got a really strong personality, lots of opinions that are like that I just want to share and have her be able to share. And it was really hard to stay focused. And I think the way that I was able to do that was really leaning on AJ again and sort of getting collaborating in some ways and kind of understanding, AJ, what do you think is the most important message that you want in this film? If we had to really narrow to like one big thing, what is that? And for her, it was absolutely this pay gap. And so that's where we went with the story. But I think the challenge in some ways, and maybe if we had shot longer, we would have had more space to do this and done a bigger film. But the challenge, I think, really was figuring out how do we focus, because there's so much happening in her life and in her story. And so.
Yeah, I mean, I encountered that same exact issue. Like I said before, the film was sort of a narrow scope, focusing on one athlete. And then when I expanded to working with a bunch of other people, and, that involved getting a lot of other interviews, I started to get a lot of content that wasn't really relevant to the message of community and sort of sharing the ideas of the games. Like, for example, I interviewed Stan's mom, and I was just hoping to, get her talking about Stan and how she was proud of him and whatnot. But it turned into a whole thing about, Native women's rights and how she was a part of sort of the forced settlement of Anatuvik Pass and was taken from her village as a kid. And, we talked for hours about that, but really it wasn't relevant at all to my story. And, I would love to have included it, but it was so different from the message I was trying to go with. But yeah, with filming in Alaska, there's a lot of logistical problems. This was all a self-funded film, and I had to, pay to fly to Unalakleet, which is a sort of remote Alaskan village. Nick Hansen put me up with his family, which was amazing. There really isn't any hotel or anything to stay there. And Anatuvik Pass is even more remote and, not very tourist friendly at all. I was sleeping on the floor of Stan's kitchen, where his mother and he also live in that same house. So it was, it was very interesting, and, it was a learning experience, but it made for sort of a more unique film and a more unique experience for me, because I was so directly living in with these folks that I was working with. I feel like if I was, leaving the film set and coming back every day, there wouldn't have been that much camaraderie around the story and what I was trying to get by.
Yeah. And you sort of touched on this too, but I know that with, particularly with docs, I'm wondering if the films, when you started making them, if you thought you were making one story, you were telling one story, and then as the filming was continuing, it ended up being a different story, or how that shifted for you during the process.
Yeah, I mean, my film sort of changed character. It was going to be a shorter piece about a single athlete who's sort of the best of the best in this sport. But once I started talking with Nick, and he was telling me about all of his friends and how this guy is really good at this game, and I felt like I had to expand it and incorporate as many athletes as I could. And I even had two other athletes who I had interviewed during WEO who were going to be major subjects, but I just didn't have enough time to get to their village to film the sort of B-roll and their whole background story. So they didn't end up making the final cut, which was kind of sad.
Yeah, like I kind of mentioned before, this definitely changed from what I initially thought, which I was planning on doing a longer film, and then it just became this short 12-minute story. So that was not initially the plan, but I started grad school right after doing this shoot, and so I was in school and kind of starting other projects, and then this became something that I did separate from school, but got a lot of support from classmates.
That's awesome. Any favorite off-camera moments with any of your subjects, or funny stories that happened while filming, or favorite moments of filming, I guess? Either any of those, that question that I just asked you guys.
AJ really wanted to try cryotherapy when we were there, and I think it was it's kind of new in Baton Rouge, so we filmed her doing that. It didn't end up feeling super relevant to the story, but it looked very cold, maybe colder than what you were shooting, actually.
Is that ice baths? And that's a stupid, I don't know.
It's not even an ice bath. You walk into a chamber that goes to some ridiculously cold temperature, and apparently it's good for you. But I feel like I would have died if I had done it.
Yeah, when I had two great moments. One with Nick when I flew to Unalakleet and I got off the plane. It's a very small, I don't know, the Alaskan village airports are all sort of the same, but it's just like a building with a runway. So I got off, and I'm waiting outside trying to look around to see him, and he shows up on a four-wheeler, an ATV, and he just says, "Yeah, strap your bags to the four-wheeler and sit on the back." So I just strapped all my camera stuff. We got big camera bags hanging off the four-wheeler, and I'm sitting on the back, and he drives me to his house, which is fairly close, but that was really fun. And then we got to ride a lot of four-wheelers, just commuting around Unalakleet. did some awesome river boating, as you saw in the film. That was sort of all new to me. And then in Anatuvik Pass, when I first arrived, so it was about the first week of August when I filmed that. And the first night I was there, it snowed. And that's sort of what provided the snow on the very tops of the mountains in a lot of those shots of Gates of the Arctic National Park up there. And so anyway, when Stan and I went out to go hiking to film all that content, you know, I'm suited up in my full like fall raven pants. I got my big hiking boots on. I'm geared up, and he's in sweatpants and sneakers. And we start trekking out there, and immediately outside of the village, there's a big river crossing. And I'm looking at it like, I wasn't hoping to get wet, you know, this early in our long hike. And he just trudges right through it, doesn't even care, doesn't do anything. And he looks back at me, he's like, do you want me to carry you? And I was like, I guess whatever, if you're offering. So he fireman carries me, puts me over his shoulders and carries me across this river. And then he goes back and gets the camera bag. And, you know, so I'm happy, I'm dry. And then within about like 30 minutes, there's another river. And I'm like, I'm not going to do this to you all this whole trip. You know, I'll man up and I'll cross this river. And I do a lot of hiking. So it was fine. But it was just very funny that he sort of looked at me like an outsider. And, you know, and by the end of it, we were out there for almost, it was 16-ish hours. And we really bonded. And he was saying like he hadn't hiked that far out with somebody. You know, a lot of the folks in the village are sadly either too lazy or they just don't want to go out that far. So he was really happy to have made that friendship, and it turned out amazing. So
did you try any of the events in any of the competitions? Like, did you try that knuckle? I don't remember what it's called, but the knuckle jumping thing.
Yeah, the knuckle hop.
Yeah.
No, I didn't get involved too much with the actual playing of the games. But in Unoclete, they have a really amazing July 4th celebration, so I was able to participate in some of the events for that, and try some muktuk, which is whale, and seal as well.
Another thing that really stuck out to me about, sort of both of these, I think in some ways, but in particular, the knocking down the fences, I'm wondering, I know that you said that AJ really wanted to focus on the pay gap, and she talked about her boyfriend who is, not experiencing the other end of that. And I guess my first thought was how difficult it would be to be in a relationship like that, where you're seeing the person you're with constantly, the person who is sort of like the example of what you feel you should be, you know, how you should be treated. Did you talk to him at all about that, or did you meet him? Did you talk to her about sort of like any challenges that came up with that? Because that would be that just really struck me, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It struck me too. And I think it's something that AJ struggled with, because it was so supportive of her boyfriend, but like, it was just that example right in front of her. We didn't have a chance to meet him. He was not in Baton Rouge when we were there. I'm not sure if he was already in the minor leagues at that point, but I think he actually was. But yeah, it was definitely something that was kind of front and center on her mind that she was wanting to talk about.
What's the one thing that either or both of you would want people to take away from your film?
I think one of the things that I feel like that I want people to take away, or that I feel like is a message, there are like, I think two that are a little bit more nuanced than your typical, like, you know, women aren't getting paid as much as men, which we all kind of like know. The two things to me that are a little bit more nuanced. One is, I think AJ's story really dispels that myth of meritocracy. And this is something that the professor that we interviewed, Amira Rose Davis, talked about in the film. But AJ is working so hard, and we have this idea in America that if you work hard, you will achieve your dreams. And like, she is actually achieving a lot of her dreams, but there are so many barriers that she faces as a woman, as a Black woman, as all these kind of factors that layer onto that experience. And I think she shows what that looks like when actually the path is not paved for you, or the world is not built for you as like a white person or a cis male or whatever it might be. So I think that was one thing that I felt like was important in her story. And then I think the other takeaway that has actually, my opinion has changed a little bit on this, has to do with AJ's relationship to how she looks when she plays. And I think at first I was highly skeptical of just the idea, even when she talked about like putting on mascara before playing softball, my initial thought was like a little bit judgmental of that. And I'm an athlete and I just can't, that's not my style. Like I can't imagine putting on makeup for a sports game. But I love how she kind of navigates that and figures out like, I'm not going to do this. That's like what's expected of me because this is what they say you have to do in softball, like wearing bows, or I'm not going to do it for the male gaze or whatever it might be, but I'm going to do it for me and figure out what works for me. And I think her relationship to that actually kind of changed my understanding and my relationship to that as well. So I appreciated how she had navigated that experience.
Yeah, that also really struck a chord with me. I thought it was really, really interesting. Yeah, and how about you, Nick?
The takeaway, right? I think I think with games of survival, I was really trying to first spread awareness for Alaskan Eskimo people. You know, there's sort of a misconception about this community, I think. You know, and a lot of people in the lower 48 don't even sort of realize, you know, that there are indigenous folks that live in Alaska, and there's a lot of them, and you know they have some serious history, and it's a lot more modern history. Some of the things that have gone on in Alaska with Native folk than have happened in the lower 48, like as far as you know the reservations and those things, that was sort of hundreds of years, whereas in Alaska in the 1950s is when you know Stan's mom was taken from her village and put in a Catholic school in Fairbanks. So it's fairly relevant in sort of you know the whole kind of washing of the and also just showcasing the games. That was really important, and how there are sports out there that are all about community and sportsmanship, and it's not all about an individual athlete. You know, it's not necessarily about winning, it's about just showing up and having a good time, you know, sharing culture with your community. I think all of that is a really positive and hopeful message that you just don't see a lot with modern sports. It seems like everything is ultra competitive. Everyone wants to be the best of the best. You know, it's nice to know that there are folks out there who just want to have fun and you know keep sharing in their traditional ways.
Yeah, I think those are things that I took away from both of these. So that's great. We'll wrap it up. We have time for another just last question. I always like to know what is up next for you guys. What do you guys have coming up? Next projects?
You want to go first this time, Nick?
Sure. What do I have on the docket? I've since moved to Vermont, so I'm working up here with a small organization called Aging in Heartland. It's the town that I'm in, and it's sort of an organization that helps older folks just get by with, you know, help at the house and whatever. So I'm working on a little series with them of sort of vignettes of families that are longtime generational families in the area. So we've already done a portrait of a maple syrup family that's been here since the early 1900s. The next one is a seed saver, and she's sort of handed off her knowledge to a younger guy in town to continue with saving and selling seeds. And then I have an ongoing project that we filmed in Bosnia about a Bosnian family that left during the war in the early 90s, and they moved to Portland, Maine. And now we returned to Bosnia as a family for the first time 2 summers ago, and they were able to see their old house, which has since been destroyed, and go to the prison camp where my friend's father was, and have a huge family reunion with people they hadn't seen in 20 or so years. So that was really amazing experience, and I hope that we can share that sometime soon.
That all sounds really cool. I'm excited to see it, and I love Vermont and sugaring sounds. That sounds like great. For the last 2 years, I've been working on an investigation of a juvenile detention center that's also in Louisiana. Just by chance, ended up doing another project there, and the film is done. But I'm working on an article that's kind of a actually deeper part of the investigation, and so hopefully it'll all come out in the next few months. But I'm very ready for it to be in the world. It feels like it's been a long time.
Yeah. Wow. Those are, and you guys both have awesome and very interesting things coming up. So everyone should be looking out for those. Definitely. Well, thank you guys so much for being here and for participating in the festival. And I'm sorry that we couldn't do this in person, but hopefully we can in the future. And we'll have you guys in Boston at some point down the line. So that's it. Thanks guys so much for everything.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Pleasure to be a part of the festival.